I was so dumb to ever hang out with him. I was one of tons of people who wish they never met him. Every single minute I spent with him, I regret it now, and I really apologized for doing that. I also met Jeffrey Epstein just one single time. I felt bad about it the moment I walked through the door. I even had bad dreams about it later. So you're chilling down there drinking cocktails while Bill Clinton is getting a massage from some girl who's pressing herself against the back of his head, whether she knew what she was doing or not, maybe even having sex with girls who were too young. Maybe for some guys that was what they were into, because it really seemed like that was Epstein's thing. Yeah, Joe Rogan just straight up said out loud what nobody thought he would, and he named some of his close friends who show up in the Epstein files. The newest batch of more than 3 million documents, emails, and videos released by the Department of Justice showed some of the most powerful people in the world linked to Jeffrey Epstein. And today we're gonna go through all the names that popped up in those files. It's so messy. You know, the whole thing is just. I think anyone who looks at it sees this as a rabbit hole that goes super deep, right to the center of the earth. And there are so many people mixed up in this. Here's the big question everyone asks. If there was a Jeffrey Epstein and he was doing all these shady things, is there a Jeffrey Epstein out there right now that nobody knows about? There's a million of them. A million. I mean, that's why I find this whole thing really interesting to study, even though it's not my main focus. It helps explain so much about how US government stuff works and how government connects with big private businesses. Jeffrey Epstein was one of those professional fixers. He's part of a group of people who don't really sit inside one government agency or one company, but in that messy space in between that links everything together. Less than a week ago, the Department of Justice put out over 3 million pages of records, around 2,000 videos, and about 180,000 images from different investigations connected to Epstein. Most of these had a lot of blacked out parts. But even with names hidden and faces covered, when you start connecting everything, you see that big-name politicians, billionaires, CEOs, and even the British royal family were all linked to Jeffrey Epstein, even after he got arrested. What's crazy is these weren't just random one-time meetups. The papers have flight logs, inside emails, contact lists, sworn statements, and video proof that kept putting the same powerful names near Epstein for years. You're telling me there's a spot where they take important people to trap them with underage girls and film the whole thing? Really? Like, what? Get out of here. Like, no way. President Clinton's been there. Everyone's been there. Like, what? It sounds fake. And not only is it real, but people keep getting killed over it. Did you see that latest Clinton advisor who got murdered? Yep. Yeah. Hung with an extension cord himself in the chest 30 miles from his house, and they're calling it a suicide, and now even Elon Musk is asking where's the client list. Yeah, we should probably see who's been to that island. Yeah, we should probably see who's been to that island. Now here's the thing. Joe knew about Epstein's island way before any of this blew up. According to him, Alex Jones was warning him about Epstein way back, long before it became big news. Joe said Alex Jones kept saying something really dark was going on at Epstein's island, that it wasn't just a party spot for rich folks, but a place where big shots were getting trapped. Back then Rogan thought it was nuts. It sounded way too wild, too hard to pee. Rove, and honestly too crazy to believe. But now looking back, Joe says that's what makes this whole thing so creepy. He was the guy who told me about Epstein's island more than 10 years ago, and I thought it was the craziest thing I'd ever heard. I was like, what are you talking about? There's an island. Like, it sounds like a movie plot. There's an island where they fly in famous rich scientists and politicians and they trap them with underage girls and film it so they can use it against them later. Like what? That sounds like lizard people stuff. It sounds like 5G causes COVID or whatever. But it turned out to be true, and it's one of many things he warned me about. He was the first one to tell me about a social credit score system. He's like, they're gonna try to set up a social credit score, and your money will be connected to it. They'll have digital money that's controlled, and if you step out of line, you won't be able to buy stuff. You won't be able to travel. You won't be able to do anything. They're gonna try to keep you stuck in a 15-minute area around your home. And they're starting to do that in some places with this new release, though, it's all slowly starting to click. And the names of the people involved are wild. What's crazy is how many of these names were already out there years ago, quietly talked about and then shut down fast. Back then the news called them just coincidences or stuff that wasn't proven. But with the newest documents, those same names keep showing up with real dates, repeated contacts, and straight links to Epstein's whole setup. And the chairman of a big law firm is stepping down because of his connection to Jeffrey Epstein. Paul Weiss Law Chair Brad Karp said in a statement, quote, "Recent reporting has created a distraction and has placed a focus on me that's not in the best interest of the firm." The firm says Karp will stay with the firm, just in a different job. Senior Washington reporter Will Stason is here for more. Hi, Will. So what? The latest on this growing list of big names getting heat over the Epstein files. Yeah, Diane. Well, I think Mr. Karp here is kind of the latest person caught up in these Epstein files. Like you said, the really powerful law firm Paul Weiss announced that Mr. Karp would be stepping down after his name showed up in these files. Now the law firm didn't say exactly why Mr. Karp is stepping down, and before this they said he did nothing wrong. But with this new release, his name appears in the files, mostly with his assistant trying to set up meetings with Mr. Epstein. There's also an email between Mr. Karp and Epstein where he's asking if he could help get his son some kind of job in an upcoming Woody Allen film. So I think these emails are still causing problems across different industries. It's kind of the latest fallout here. We saw recently that popular wellness influencer PETA AIA also stepped down from his role at the protein company. Bill Gates is one of the names getting hit the hardest. A picture of Bill Gates posing with a woman whose face was blacked out was in the files. There were also emails between Gates and Epstein that showed Gates was trying to hide a sexually transmitted disease from his wife after contact with Russian girls. As soon as these emails came out, Bill Gates put out a statement right away calling them totally ridiculous and completely made up. He also said Epstein was trying to blackmail or trash him by writing an email in 2013 that even said he tried to give antibiotics to Melinda just in case she got infected too. Listen to Melinda, I was only at dinners. You know, I never went to the island. I never met any women. And so, you know, the more that comes out, the more clear it'll be that although the time was a mistake, it had nothing to do with that kind of behavior. There we go. I never went, never met any women. Wow. This is getting more and more interesting, Esther. Yes, it is. And unfortunately for Bill Gates now he has to deal with people thinking, at least a lot of them, that Melinda divorced him to get away from that whole scene. Also because of his connection, or his weak links which he denies, with Jeffrey Epstein. I mean the claim that he probably got an STD from a Russian prostitute tied to Jeffrey Epstein was actually written in a note by Jeffrey Epstein to himself. One of the more personal parts of all this is how it hurt Gates's marriage. Melinda Gates has been really open that Epstein's involvement was part of why she left. She said in interviews that finding out was painful and raised big warning signs for her long before their divorce, especially about Bill's choice to keep spending time with Epstein after he got convicted. I also met Jeffrey Epstein exactly one time. Did you? Yes. Because I wanted to see who this man was. And I regretted it from the second I stepped in the door. He was awful. He was evil in person. I had nightmares about it afterwards. So, you know, my heart breaks for these young women because that's how I felt. And here I'm an older woman. My God, I feel terrible for those young women. It was awful. People in the files have used the same excuse and they're all saying pretty much the same thing, that Epstein was trying to blackmail them. According to these people, Epstein supposedly collected info, emails, and bad material to use against them. On the outside, that story might sound believable. Epstein clearly hung around powerful people, and lots of witnesses say he loved recording everything. But here's where it starts to not add up. If Epstein was blackmailing all these people, then why were so many of them meeting him over and over? And how did he even get close to them? Joe has a really interesting take on how this was all working. Let me just get real and say, what do you, if I put a gun to your head, what do you think is your best guess about who Epstein was? Who was he working for? Well, I don't know, right? So I'm just guessing. Everybody wants to say he was working for Mossad. He very well could have been. He could have been working for the CIA. He could have been a guy on his own but also working with them, right? Like a guy they used but never fully backed. Like an asset. Yeah. And a guy who could move money around. He was definitely good at laundering money. The moving money around stuff was very weird because he had money in ways nobody could explain. Yeah. He had a huge amount of money through no way that anybody could ever explain, which, you know, if you're funded by a state, you're funded by Israel and Israel's funded by America, and you know there's also NGOs and nonprofits and ways to move money where you can give this guy cash. Yeah. So he was like Weinstein, who is an economist, right? Weinstein's a real mathematician. Eric. Yeah. So when Eric met him, his first thought was he was fake. He's a made-up thing. Yeah. A construct. And did he tell you the whole story about the girl sitting on his lap? So Epstein, while he's meeting Eric Weinstein for the first time, has a beautiful woman sitting on his lap and he's bouncing her around. So her chest is moving while he's asking math questions. Yeah. Talking serious stuff. So he was obviously trying to hook nerds. He was fishing for nerds, and I think he caught a bunch of nerds in that net. Epstein wasn't doing this by himself. One person doesn't just suddenly become best friends with royal families in Saudi Arabia and England out of nowhere. You're telling me a random money guy somehow got full access to kings, presidents, and billionaires with no help? That's not how power works. Epstein didn't just luck into those groups. He was put there. Connections like that come through gatekeepers, go-betweens, and groups that gain from keeping certain people linked and certain secrets hidden. Royal families don't hang with random finance guys unless someone they trust is saying he's okay. And that's the hardest part of this whole story. Someone from the government was probably helping him. There's a lot of those guys who ended up going to that island. They probably thought, this is awesome. We get to party. Nothing's free. And they probably felt like rock stars because they get to chill with super smart people on an island with a guy who's just a billionaire giver who's quirky and just loves women. He's a single guy who says so. And it all seemed too perfect. So true. Because it was. So I think he was an asset, whether it was strictly for Mossad or Israel or the United States or a CIA thing, I don't know. But I think it was probably part of a blackmail setup effort. Yeah. Because those guys, there's a dirty secret about the people in Congress, they party. Okay. They're normal people in their 30s or 40s or whatever, and every now and then they do coke and get drunk and they're human. Remember that DC madam who had a whole book of names and then she ended up dead saying I'm not gonna? Yeah, because there's probably a lot like that, and those kinds of trap operations let these weirdos know like, hey, you're safe with me. Charlie will handle it all. Look, Bill Clinton used to come here. Don't worry. And we're going to the island. That's a huge sign it's okay. It's like presidents were here, so it must be safe. Exactly. We're on the island with Bill. This is fine. And all these girls show up and you're like, well, this is Christmas in July. Bill is really into string theory. He'd like to chat with you about string theory. So you're sitting there having cocktails while Bill Clinton's getting a massage from some girl who's rubbing her chest against the back of his head while she massages. Yeah. He's like, yeah, that's really interesting. Hey, I'm kinda tired. Gonna take a nap. Another thing about black holes. Yeah. Yeah, and I think they all thought it was this nice swap of powerful people and smart people, and then they were just getting dirt on all of them. Guys cheating on wives, guys maybe knowing or not knowing having sex with underage girls. Maybe for some guys that was their thing. Sure. Because it seemed like with Epstein that was his thing. Yeah. 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 That's what I think too. I don't think there's any proof either. I think it's all been cleaned up with the plea deal, and I don't think there's any list that's gonna point to a smoking gun. I don't know about that. I think it's all been handled. I think you could open every file. But that's the truth. Why did they have all those files? Why parade around with binders? Because remember those photo ops where they were like, look, we have the Epstein files right here, and they showed binders. Like, what kind of show is that? If you don't really have the Epstein files, it's just politics acting. And what I mean is, I think if they're keeping stuff quiet, it's because it's video of underage girls or video of victims who don't want it out. And the Justice Department can't make that public. They can't show it to Congress. That's all locked for privacy. Right. Well, that is the argument. But then they're saying now there are no files. They're saying there's no video there. I'm telling you, I don't know. I think they have video. I think if you have an island and you want to trap people, you can't just have stories. You need video and then show it to the guy like, Mr. Clinton, sit down. This idea might sound nuts, but here's the thing. The newest Epstein file release also showed more about how tied Epstein was to people in Donald T. Trump's close group. While Trump himself says he did nothing wrong and cut contact years ago, his name shows up hundreds of times in the new papers. More important, several of Trump's buddies, including Steve Bannon, Elon Musk, and Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, appear in emails and messages keeping in touch with Epstein years after his first arrest and conviction. Elon Musk shows up in the new Epstein files mostly through emails from 2012 to 2013, talking about possible meetups, travel ideas, and even maybe visiting Epstein's Caribbean island. One email has Musk asking, what day/night will be the wildest party on your island? Which doesn't really match his earlier story that he just turned down Epstein's invites. The papers also suggest Epstein was trying to get himself into Musk's friend and work circles. Musk says he never went to the island, never flew on the Lolita Express, and says the emails are being twisted or picked to make him look guilty. Bottom line, the files show he knew Epstein, and a top Justice Department official says the review of the Jeffrey Epstein files is finished. The same official said there would be no new charges. Now the Trump administration is getting criticism from Epstein survivors and Democrats. This was California Congressman Rogan yesterday. There is a demand for elite accountability, but the survivors' lawyers that I've talked to say the survivors are still upset. They're upset that many of their names came out by accident without blackouts and they want to make sure the rest of the files come out. CBS News Justice correspondent Scott MacFarlane joins us from our Washington bureau with more on this. Scott, you've been going through as much of this as you can. What's in this so-called final batch? Yeah, it's a process. We're still working through millions of pages here. And it's worth noting these were released more than 40 days after the legal deadline for the Department of Justice to do so. No one besides Epstein and former associate Ghislaine Maxwell has been charged. But the Department of Justice saying its work is done has only made more people angry. Joe talked about this too. The way the government seems nervous and almost scared to put out the files. He said if there was really nothing to hide, they would have dropped everything at once, clean and open. Instead, they've come out slow, in pieces, full of blackouts, delays, and weak reasons. Even after Congress ordered the release, the Justice Department missed deadlines and said big parts are still being held back. About the Epstein releases like before we got started. First of all, photo dump and the emails. It's nuts. But it's also they're doing it so slowly. You guys have had this stuff for a year. Don't and we were promised multiple times. It's coming. It's coming. Doesn't it seem like you could just throw all that into AI at this stage and just black out the victims' names and go? Yeah, of course. It seems like that would take 5 minutes. I mean, it feels like you can't help but think the administration is just covering for someone and that's why it's happening. Covering someone's back. I mean, it's all guessing why they haven't released it, but it's not good. It's not good for trust. It's also not good that this thing was going on, that they had this weird blackmail setup running. That's very strange. Very weird. But it kind of makes sense because if you're a 60-year-old billionaire and you're into weird stuff, but you're a huge software guy and everyone knows your face. Yeah. It's hard to get your weird on. Well, that's the thing, it makes sense when you think some of these guys really liked going there. It's that's the only place they can go, right? You can't go anywhere else. And that's why they set it up for the yeah.